I stood there in my pale blue dress, the one I'd saved for months to buy, and my daughter looked at me with pure disgust. Her eyes, those beautiful hazel eyes I used to stare into when she was a baby, swept over me like I was something rotting on the side of the road. "You're not seriously planning to be in my wedding photos looking like that, are you?" Before I could answer, before I could even process what she'd just said, Vivienne spat at my feet. "Not near them. Them." I watched the saliva hit the marble floor of that pristine bridal suite, and I felt something inside me shatter into a million pieces. My name is Margaret Chen, and the scars on my face, the twisted shiny skin that stretches from my left cheek down to my neck and across both my arms, they're not from an accident I was careless about. They're not from something I could have prevented. These scars are the price I paid to save my daughter's life. And on her wedding day she called me ugly. She called me embarrassing. She told me I was ruining the most important day of her life just by existing in the same room as her. The scars catch the light differently than normal skin. They're tight, pulled in places, almost glossy where the burn was deepest. I've lived with them for 24 years. I've learned to meet people's stares with a steady gaze. I've learned to apply makeup that minimizes but never hides. I've learned to live with the fact that when people see me, they see the burns first and the person second. But I never, not in my worst nightmares, thought my own daughter would look at me the way strangers do. With revulsion. With pity. With that uncomfortable need to look away. But before I tell you about that wedding day, about how my daughter pushed me out of the bridal suite and told me to leave her wedding entirely, you need to understand how we got here. You need to know what these scars actually mean. 24 years ago, I was someone completely different. I was 26 years old, and if I'm being honest, I was beautiful. Not in an arrogant way, but in the way that made people turn their heads. Long black hair that fell to my waist, smooth skin, a smile that my fiancé Richard used to say could light up a room. I was 3 months away from graduating from culinary school, top of my class, with job offers from 2 prestigious restaurants in the city. Richard had just proposed with his grandmother's ring, a delicate sapphire that caught the light just right. We had a 1-bedroom apartment in a converted brownstone, shabby but charming, the kind of place young couples dream about when they're building a life together. And we had Vivienne, her daughter, 18 months old, with chubby cheeks and curls that bounced when she laughed. She was everything. Richard and I would stand over her crib at night, just watching her sleep, amazed that we'd created something so perfect. It was a Tuesday night in March. I remember because I'd just finished a double shift at the restaurant where I was doing my internship, and my feet ached in that deep, bone-tired way that only chefs understand. Richard was working late, some project deadline at his architecture firm. I'd fed Vivienne her dinner, mashed sweet potatoes that got everywhere, given her a bath that soaked both of us, and put her down around 7:30. She'd fought sleep like she always did, crying for just 5 more minutes, just one more story. But eventually, her eyes had fluttered closed, and I'd tiptoed out of her nursery, leaving the door cracked open the way she liked it. I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich when I smelled it. Smoke. Not the pleasant smell of a fireplace or someone grilling outside. This was acrid, chemical, wrong. My heart started pounding before my brain even caught up. I ran toward Vivienne's room, and when I pushed open the door, I saw orange light flickering inside the walls. The electrical outlet behind her crib, the one we'd been meaning to get checked but hadn't because we were young and broke, and it seemed like something that could wait, it was sparking. Flames were crawling up the wallpaper, spreading fast, so much faster than you'd think. And Vivienne was screaming. Not crying the way babies cry when they want attention. Screaming in pure terror, standing in her crib, reaching for me with those tiny hands. I could have run back to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, called 911 and waited for the firefighters. That's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what every safety video tells you. Get out of the building. Let the professionals handle it. But in that moment, watching my baby scream for me while flames spread across her wall, reaching toward her crib, I didn't think about the right thing to do. I didn't think about myself at all. I just thought I have to get her out. The heat hit me the second I stepped fully into that room. It was like walking into an oven. the air so hot it burned my lungs when I breathed. The flames had spread to the curtains now. Great sheets of fire that dripped burning fabric onto the floor. I ran to the crib, and that's when my left arm brushed against the wall where the fire was hottest. The pain was instant and unreal. Like someone had pressed a blowtorch directly against my skin. I screamed, but I didn't stop moving. Couldn't. I grabbed Vivienne out of that crib, and she clung to me, still screaming, her little body shaking. The flames were everywhere now, blocking the doorway, and I realized with a cold, clear certainty that we might not make it out. But I had to try. I wrapped myself around Vivienne, curling my body over hers like a shell, and I ran through those flames. I remember the smell more than anything. Burning hair. Burning fabric. Burning skin. My skin. The dress I was wearing, a cheap cotton thing, caught fire. I felt it melting into my arms, my shoulder, my face. The pain was so intense I couldn't even scream anymore. My body just went into some kind of shock, moving on pure instinct. I made it to the hallway, to the front door, out onto the street where the cold March air hit my burns, and I finally collapsed. A neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from upstairs, she'd already called 911 when she smelled the smoke. She took Vivienne from my arms. I remember looking up at her, trying to ask if my baby was okay, but no words would come out. Vivienne was crying, coughing from the smoke, but she was alive. Not a single burn on her perfect skin. I'd kept her safe. The paramedics arrived maybe 3 minutes later, but it felt like hours. They cut what was left of my dress off my body right there on the sidewalk. One of them, a young guy with kind eyes, he kept talking to me, telling me I was going to be okay, but I saw his face when he looked at my injuries. I saw the fear in his expression. Third-degree burns across 40% of my body. My left arm, my shoulder, my neck, the left side of my face. The flames had eaten through skin down to muscle in some places, down to bone in others. I spent 4 months in the hospital. 4 months of surgeries, of skin grafts that didn't take, of infections that nearly killed me 3 separate times. 4 months of pain so constant and overwhelming that I begged the nurses to just let me die. But I didn't die. I survived. And when I was finally stable enough to have visitors beyond Richard, when they finally brought a mirror to my room because I kept asking to see, I understood that the woman I'd been was gone. The left side of my face looked like melted wax. The burns had destroyed my cheek, pulled my mouth into a permanent slight grimace, took my eyebrow entirely. My neck was a mass of scar tissue, tight and discolored. My arm looked like something from a horror movie, the skin grafts creating a patchwork of textures and colors that would never look normal. I stared at that reflection for a long time, and then I cried. I cried for hours. Because I knew, even then, that everything was about to change. Richard tried. I'll give him that. He visited every day during those 4 months. He held my good hand. He brought pictures of Vivienne, told me stories about her first steps, her new words. But I could see it in his eyes every time he looked at me. The revulsion he tried to hide. The grief for the woman he'd fallen in love with. The woman who didn't exist anymore. 6 months after I got out of the hospital, he left. We were in our new apartment, a ground-floor unit with better electrical, paid for by the settlement from our landlord. Vivienne was napping, and Richard sat down across from me at our kitchen table with tears in his eyes and said, "I can't do this anymore, Margaret. I can't look at you the same way. Sorry. I'm so sorry, but I just can't." He moved out that weekend. Filed for divorce a month later. Signed away his parental rights 4 months after that. Just walked away from both of us like we were a life he'd tried on and decided didn't fit. So it was just me and Vivienne. Me with my ruined face and my ruined body, working overnight shifts in restaurant kitchens where I could hide in the back and no one had to look at me. Me raising this beautiful, perfect little girl who looked nothing like the monster I'd become. I worked 3 jobs sometimes, slept 4 hours a night, just to give her everything she needed. Dance classes, nice clothes, good school. I wanted her to have the life I'd lost. I wanted her to be everything I couldn't be anymore. And she was beautiful. God, she was so beautiful. She had Richard's height, my bone structure from before, skin like porcelain, hair that fell in natural waves. By the time she was 12, people would stop us on the street to tell me what a gorgeous daughter I had. And then they'd look at me at the scars and you could see the question in their eyes. How did someone like you have a daughter like that? Vivienne grew up perfect and untouched, without a single mark on her skin. She grew up as everything I used to be. Everything I'd sacrificed to save her life. And on her wedding day, she looked at those sacrifices, at the scars that bought her life. And she told me I was too ugly to be in her photos. If you're watching this and you can't believe a daughter would actually do that to her mother, stick around. Because what happened next, and what happened to Vivienne months later, it's something you won't believe. Hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started. But let me ask you something before we continue. What would you do if you sacrificed everything for someone you loved, and they looked at you with disgust? Would you walk away? Would you fight back? Or would you do what I did? Drop your answer in the comments because I really want to know. Now let me tell you about the years that led up to that wedding day, and how I watched my daughter slowly learn to be ashamed of me. The first time Vivienne asked me to hide, she was 12 years old. We were in the car, my old Honda that made a rattling sound whenever I went over 30 miles an hour, driving to her middle school. It was picture day, and she'd spent an hour that morning getting ready, curling her hair with the iron I'd bought her for her birthday, putting on the new dress we'd found on sale at Macy's. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful. We were about 3 blocks from the school when she said it. Quiet, almost casual, like she was asking me to change the radio station. "Mom, can you drop me off a block away from school?" I glanced over at her, confused. "A block away? Honey, it's raining. You'll get your dress wet." She didn't look at me. Just stared out the window, her jaw tight in that way that meant she was holding something back. "I don't care. Please, drop me off at the corner." And I did. I pulled over a block away from Jefferson Middle School, watched her gather her backpack, pop open the umbrella I kept in the back seat. "Have a great day, sweetheart," I called after her. She didn't answer. Just walked away quickly, like she was trying to put distance between us before anyone could see us together. I told myself it was nothing. 12-year-olds are weird. They're figuring out who they are, testing boundaries, pushing away from their parents. It's normal. Healthy even. That's what the parenting book said. So I drove to my shift at the restaurant and pushed the uncomfortable feeling in my chest down deep where I wouldn't have to look at it. But it happened again. And again. Every morning the same request. "Drop me off at the corner, Mom." Eventually she stopped even asking. She'd just point to a spot a block away, and I'd pull over, and she'd get out without a word. High school was worse. Vivienne got into Westfield Academy, one of those prestigious private schools where the other kids showed up in cars that cost more than I made in a year. I'd worked overtime for 6 months to save up for her tuition, lied to her and said she'd gotten a scholarship because I didn't want her to feel guilty. She deserved to go to a good school. She deserved every opportunity one never had. But from the very first day, she made it clear. I was not part of that world. "Mom, you don't need to come to the parent orientation," she said the week before school started. "It's boring anyway. Just paperwork and stuff. I want to meet your teachers, sweetie. See your classrooms." Her face went tight. That expression I was learning to recognize. Fear mixed with something that looked an awful lot like disgust. "Mom, please, just don't." I went anyway. I put on my nicest blouse, the one with the high collar that covered most of my neck scars, did my makeup carefully, and showed up to that orientation with a smile on my face. I was her mother. I had every right to be there. The look started the second I walked through those mahogany doors. Other parents, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, staring at my face. Trying not to stare, which somehow made it worse. Their eyes would land on the scars, widen slightly, then dart away like they'd seen something obscene. I heard the whispers. Not the words but the tone. That hushed, gossipy tone that people use when they're talking about something tragic or scandalous or pitiable. And Vivienne, my beautiful 15-year-old daughter, standing across the reception hall with a group of girls who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. They saw me. Eyes met. And the expression on her face, it wasn't embarrassment. It was horror. Pure, unfiltered horror, like I'd just ruined her life by existing in the same building. She didn't come over to me. Not once during that entire 2-hour orientation. I stood alone by the refreshment table, drinking punch that was too sweet, while other parents networked and laughed and made playdates for their children. And my daughter pretended I didn't exist. On the drive home she finally spoke. "Why did you come?" "Because I'm your mother, Vivienne. People stared at you. People always stare at me. I'm used to it." She turned to look at me then, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. "Well, I'm not used to it, Mom. People ask questions. They want to know what happened to you. They want to know if it's genetic, if I might end up looking like that. It's hard for me. Hard for her. Hard for her." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, felt my throat closing up with all the things I wanted to say. I wanted to scream at her that Hard was working 3 jobs to pay for her fancy school. Hard was living with chronic pain from nerve damage that would never heal. Hard was watching the man I loved walk away because he couldn't stand to look at me. Hard was sacrificing my entire face, my entire body, my entire life to pull her out of a burning building. But I didn't say any of that. Instead I said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to embarrass you." And I heard how pathetic that sounded. Me apologizing to my daughter for having scars. For surviving. For saving her life. "Just," she sighed, staring back out the window, "maybe don't come to school events anymore." Okay. I told myself she was just a teenager. Teenagers are cruel. They're self-absorbed. They don't understand consequences or sacrifice or unconditional love. She'd grow out of it. She'd mature and realize how hurtful she was being, and we'd laugh about it someday. That's what I told myself. But she never invited friends over to our apartment. Not once in 4 years of high school. I'd hear her on the phone, making plans to meet at someone else's house, at the mall, at the movies, anywhere but home. When I asked why, she'd shrug and say her friends lived closer to school, or their houses were bigger, or some other excuse that we both knew was a lie. The real reason was me. I was the reason. Junior year, there was a mother-daughter tea at the school. A fundraiser for the drama department. I saw the flyer on the kitchen counter, and I asked Vivienne if she wanted to go together. "We could get dressed up," I said. "Make a day of it. Maybe go shopping afterward." She looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank together. "I'm not going to that," she said quickly. "It's stupid anyway." But I found out later she did go. She went with her friend Jessica's mother, a beautiful blonde woman in her 40s who wore Chanel suits and didn't have a single visible scar. I found out because I saw the photos on Facebook, posted by the school's official page. There was Vivienne, laughing, drinking tea from a delicate china cup, sitting next to a woman who wasn't her mother. And the caption said, "What a lovely mother-daughter pair." No one corrected them. Vivienne certainly didn't. I confronted her about it that night. Not angry, just hurt. "Why didn't you tell me you went to the tea?" She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "Because I knew you'd make a big deal about it." Make a big deal. "Vivienne, I wanted to go with you. And I didn't want you to." She said it so simply. So matter-of-factly. Like my feelings didn't even register as something worth considering. Mrs. Palmer asked if I wanted to go with Jessica, and I said yes. That's it. It's not a crime. "But you let people think she was your mother." I didn't let people think anything. I just didn't correct them. She grabbed her backpack, headed toward her room. "Can we not do this right now? I have homework." And that was it. Conversation over. My daughter had literally replaced me with someone else's mother, and I was supposed to just accept it. Senior year graduation, I bought a new dress specifically for the ceremony. Navy blue, long sleeves to cover the worst of the arm scars, a high neckline. I'd saved for months to afford the really good concealer makeup that the support group had recommended, the kind that actually covered the discoloration. I spent 2 hours getting ready that morning, and when I looked in the mirror I thought, maybe this time. Maybe she'll be proud of me. I was wrong. I sat in the auditorium with all the other parents, watching my daughter walk across that stage to receive her diploma. She looked stunning in her cap and gown, her hair gleaming under the stage lights. When they called her name, Vivienne Chen, graduating summa cum laude, I stood up and cheered. I didn't care that other parents stayed seated and clapped politely. That was my baby up there. My daughter. The child I'd given everything for. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photos. I found Vivienne surrounded by her friends, all of them hugging and crying and laughing in that way teenage girls do when something big is ending and something new is beginning. I walked over with my camera smiling. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She glanced at me, then quickly back to her friends. "Thanks. Can I get a picture? Just you and me." I watched something pass over her face. Calculation. She looked around at all the other families taking photos, at the clusters of beautiful mothers with their beautiful daughters, all of them looking perfect and untouched by tragedy. Then she looked back at me. "Actually, Mom, the girls and I are taking pictures together. Maybe later." There was no later. By the time her friends dispersed, Vivienne claimed she had a headache and wanted to go home. We drove back to the apartment in silence, and the photo I wanted, the one of just the two of us marking this milestone, it never happened. I have exactly 3 photos of Vivienne and me together from her entire childhood. 3. One from her first birthday before the fire. One from her 8th grade graduation, where she's standing stiff and uncomfortable next to me, not quite smiling. And one from her 16th birthday, where I surprised her at school with cupcakes for her class, and a teacher insisted on taking a picture before Vivienne could escape. In that photo you can see it clearly in her expression. She hates being next to me. She's mortified. 3 photos in 18 years. Most mothers have hundreds, thousands. But my daughter couldn't stand to be photographed with me. When college acceptance letters started arriving, Vivienne got into 7 schools. Good schools. Great schools. But the one she chose was Ashford University, a prestigious private institution 3 hours away, where tuition alone was $60,000 a year. Not including room and board. Not including books and fees and all the other expenses that came with sending your child to a school where the other students summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. "Are you sure about Ashford?" I asked her when she told me her decision. "It's so expensive, honey. State University has an excellent program, and with your scholarships, I want to go to Ashford." Her voice was firm. "Final. It's the best school I got into." What she didn't say, but what I understood with painful clarity, was that Ashford was 3 hours away. Far enough that I couldn't just drop by. Far enough that she could build an entirely new life where no one knew about her mother with the scarred face. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. My regular line cook position at Antonio's Italian restaurant, where I worked the dinner shift 6 nights a week. Weekend mornings at a catering company, where I'd haul heavy equipment and prep food for events I'd never be invited to. And overnight shifts twice a week at a bakery, where I'd mix dough and frost cakes while the rest of the city slept. I'd come home at 6 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, then get up and do it all again. The pain was constant. The burns had damaged nerves in my arm and shoulder, and some days the pain was so bad I could barely lift a pot. But I took ibuprofen like candy and kept working because my daughter deserved an education. She deserved a future. She deserved everything I could give her, even if it killed me. She called me maybe once a month from college. Brief conversations, surface-level updates. Yes, classes were fine. Yes, she was making friends. No, I didn't need to visit, there was nothing to see really, just a boring campus. Parents' weekend. Oh, that was optional, mostly for freshman parents anyway. She didn't think I needed to make the trip. I went anyway. I took a bus 3 hours to Ashford University on a crisp October Saturday, found the campus map, and tracked down her dorm. When I knocked on her door, she opened it wearing an expression I'd come to know well. That flash of panic. That desperate calculation of how to make me disappear. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "It's parents' weekend, sweetheart. I wanted to surprise you." She stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "Not inviting me in. You should have called first." I wanted it to be a surprise. I held up a bag from her favorite bakery back home. I brought those lemon bars you love. I can't do this right now. My roommate has people over and I'd love to meet your roommate. And your friends. No. She said it too quickly, too sharply. Then softer. I mean, they're busy. We have plans. I'm sorry you came all this way, but this isn't a good time. We stood in that hallway for maybe 10 minutes. Other parents walked by with their students, heading to campus tours or lunch at the dining hall. Happy families. Connected families. And my daughter stood between me and her dorm room like a bouncer keeping out an unwanted guest. I left without meeting her roommate. Without seeing her room. Without having the lunch I'd imagined we'd share. I took the bus back home and cried the entire 3 hours, and I told myself for the 1,000th time that she'd grow out of it. She was just finding herself. Building independence. Was normal. But it wasn't normal. And deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew it wasn't going to get better. Sophomore year, Vivienne met Christopher. She mentioned him casually at first. A guy in her economics class. Mark. Funny. They'd studied together a few times. But by Thanksgiving break, when she came home for exactly 2 days before claiming she had to get back for a group project, I could tell it was serious. She had that glow about her. That distracted, giddy energy of someone falling in love. Tell me about Christopher, I said as we sat in our small living room drinking tea. Trying to have the kind of mother-daughter moment we never really had anymore. Her face lit up. He's amazing, Mom. He's pre-law, wants to go into corporate litigation. His family is from Connecticut. Old money, like really old. His great-great-grandfather founded some banking institution that's still operating. They have a house in Martha's Vineyard. He sounds impressive. When do I get to meet him? The light in her face dimmed. Oh, we're taking things slow. It's still really new. But it wasn't new. I found out later they'd been dating for 4 months already. 4 months, and she hadn't mentioned him once until I asked directly. Junior year, the relationship got serious. Vivienne started spending breaks at Christopher's family home instead of coming back to our apartment. They invited me for Thanksgiving, she'd say. Or, Christopher's mom really wants me to come for spring break. There was always a reason she couldn't come home. Always another family pulling her into their orbit while I sat alone in our apartment with a turkey dinner for one. I tried not to take it personally. She was 20 years old. She was building her own life. That's what kids do. But the ache of it, the loneliness of holidays without her, it was becoming harder to ignore. What does Christopher know about me? I asked her once, during one of our rare phone calls. There was a pause. Too long. What do you mean? Have you told him about me? About the fire? He knows I have a mom. Obviously. But have you told him about my scars? About what happened? Another pause. It hasn't really come up. It hasn't really come up. We were 3 years into her relationship with this man, and she hadn't mentioned that her mother was a burn survivor. She hadn't explained why she never invited him to meet me. She'd probably shown him photos of herself, but conveniently left out any that included me. Vivienne, are you ashamed of me? Mom, don't be dramatic. I just don't think my relationship with Christopher has anything to do with me. You don't think your relationship has anything to do with me? Your mother. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. She sighed, that exasperated sound she made whenever I tried to have a real conversation. I have to go. I have class. She didn't have class. It was 8 o'clock at night. But I let her hang up because what else could I do? I couldn't force my daughter to love me. I couldn't force her to not be ashamed of how I looked. I could feel her pulling away like a tide going out, and I was standing on the shore watching helplessly as the distance grew wider and wider. But I didn't want to believe my own daughter was ashamed of me. I didn't want to accept that the child I'd literally burned for, the child I'd saved at the cost of everything I was, couldn't stand to introduce me to the man she loved. So I told myself stories. She was busy with school. She was navigating a relationship with someone from a different social class and feeling insecure. She'd come around eventually. Once she graduated, once she settled into adult life, she'd realize how much I mattered. How much I'd sacrificed. I was wrong about that too. The call came on a Thursday evening in April of her senior year. I was in the middle of my shift at Antonio's, elbow deep in pasta dough, when my phone buzzed. Vivienne's name on the screen. She hardly ever called anymore, so my heart jumped. Maybe something was wrong. Vivienne. Sweetheart, is everything okay? Mom. Yeah, everything's fine. Her voice sounded strange. Flat. Rehearsed. I have some news. Christopher proposed. We're engaged. I should have been happy. My daughter was getting married. This was supposed to be a joyful moment. But the way she said it, like she was delivering a weather report, something about it felt wrong. Oh my God, Vivienne. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I tried to inject all the enthusiasm she wasn't showing. Tell me everything. How did he propose? When did this happen? Last weekend. He took me to this restaurant in the city. Very nice place. He had the ring in the champagne, classic move. She sounded bored almost. Like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. And you said yes. Obviously. I'm calling to tell you we're engaged. I'm so happy for you, honey. This is such exciting news. When can I meet him? I'd love to take you both to dinner, celebrate properly. Silence on the other end. Then, actually, Mom, Christopher's family is handling most of the planning. His mother Patricia is really into this stuff. She's already talking about venues and dates. Of course, but I'd still love to be involved. This is your wedding, sweetheart. We could go dress shopping together, or... Mom. She cut me off, and there was an edge to her voice I recognized. That warning tone. His family is handling it. They have resources and connections that make more sense for this kind of thing. I'll keep you updated. I'm your mother, Vivienne. I want to help plan your wedding. I know. And you can help. Just let me figure out the details first, okay? Have to go. Christopher's waiting for me. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the restaurant kitchen, holding my phone, feeling something crack in my chest. She'd gotten engaged, and I was an afterthought. A problem to be managed. Someone to be kept at a distance while the real family, Christopher's family, handled the important things. I tried to be involved anyway. I called her a week later and offered to go dress shopping. We could make a day of it. Maybe go to that bridal boutique in the city you always loved. The one we used to window shop at when you were little. That's handled already, Mom. Patricia is taking me to some designer showroom next week. They have connections. Oh, well, what about a mother-daughter spa day? Just the two of us. We haven't done that in years. I don't think that's necessary. I'm pretty busy with wedding planning and finishing up my thesis. A tasting then. For the catering. I could give you my professional opinion. I've worked in kitchens for 20 years. I know good food. The venue has an in-house catering team. It's all included. But thanks. Every offer I made was met with the same response. That's handled. Not necessary. I'll let you know. Like I was some distant relative trying to insert myself into a family event. Not the mother of the bride. 2 months before the wedding, I did something I'd never done before. I went behind Vivienne's back. She'd mentioned the name of the bridal boutique in passing during one of our calls, probably not even realizing she'd let it slip. Evangeline's, an exclusive shop in Manhattan where appointments were required and dresses started at $5,000. I called and asked if Margaret Chen had an appointment that week. The receptionist, probably not supposed to give out that information but charmed by my story about wanting to surprise my daughter, told me she'd be there Saturday at 2. I showed up at 1:30. Wore my best dress, the navy one with long sleeves. Did my makeup carefully, including the expensive concealer I usually saved for special occasions. I wanted to look good. I wanted Vivienne to see me and not be embarrassed. I wanted to be part of this moment that every mother dreams about, watching her daughter try on wedding dresses. The boutique was beautiful. All white furniture and crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. The kind of place where you felt underdressed no matter what you wore. A woman in a sleek black suit greeted me at the door. "Do you have an appointment?" "My daughter does. Vivienne Chen. 2 o'clock. I wanted to surprise her." The woman's smile tightened slightly. "I see. Well, her party hasn't arrived yet. You're welcome to wait." I sat on one of the white velvet couches, feeling my heart race. Vivienne was going to be surprised. Maybe angry at first, but once she saw how much this meant to me, she'd understand. We'd have this memory together. This would be the moment that bridged the distance between us. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened. But it wasn't Vivienne alone. She walked in with an entourage. 4 other women, all beautiful, all dressed in clothes that screamed wealth. And in the center of the group, an older woman with platinum blonde hair and a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my car. Patricia. Christopher's mother. Vivienne saw me immediately. And the expression that crossed her face, it wasn't surprise. It was pure, undiluted fury. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stood up, trying to smile, trying to pretend I didn't see the anger in her eyes. "I wanted to surprise you, sweetheart. This is such an important moment, and I wanted to be here for it." The other women were staring at me now. I saw their eyes land on my scars, saw the barely concealed shock. One of them, a brunette who must have been one of the bridesmaids, actually took a small step back. Patricia moved forward, her smile perfectly polished and completely fake. "Oh, you must be Margaret. How nice to finally meet you." She extended her hand, but there was something performative about it, like she was demonstrating proper manners to the help. "Vivienne has mentioned you, of course." I shook her hand, hating how clammy my own palm felt. "It's wonderful to meet you too, Patricia. Thank you for taking such an interest in the wedding planning. Well, someone has to ensure everything is perfect. This is my son's wedding after all." She turned to Vivienne, dismissing me entirely. "Shall we get started, darling? They have 3 dresses pulled for you already. Can I talk to my mom for a second?" Vivienne's voice was tight, controlled. "Alone?" Patricia's smile didn't waver. "Of course. We'll be right over here." She herded the other women toward the dress racks, but I could feel them watching us, listening. Vivienne grabbed my arm, harder than necessary, and pulled me toward a corner of the boutique. When she spoke, her voice was a harsh whisper. "What are you doing here? I told you I'd go with Christopher's mother. I'm your mother, Vivienne. I wanted to be part of this. You're embarrassing me." Those 3 words hit like a slap. "Embarrassing you? I'm embarrassing you by wanting to help you pick out your wedding dress. Look at you, Mom. Look at where we are. Look at these people." She gestured around the boutique, at the gleaming surfaces and the designer gowns and the women who inhabited this world effortlessly. "You don't belong here. I don't belong at my own daughter's dress fitting. Can you please not make a scene? Just go home, please. I'll call you later and we can talk about this, but right now you need to leave." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of these people. In front of Patricia and her perfectly put-together friends who were probably mentally cataloging every detail of this disaster to gossip about later. "I took the day off work to be here, Vivienne. I traveled 2 hours. I just wanted to be part of your wedding. And I'm telling you that you're not needed here. Leave. Now." The coldness in her voice, the complete lack of empathy or understanding, it was like looking at a stranger. Where was the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares? Where was the child who'd once made me a Mother's Day card that said, "You're the best mommy in the world"? When had she become this person who could look at me with such contempt? Left. Walked out of that boutique with my head down, past Patricia who made some comment about how unfortunate the situation was, past the other women who couldn't even pretend not to stare. I made it to my car before I broke down completely, sobbing so hard I couldn't see to drive for 20 minutes. That was my breaking point. That was the moment I started to realize this wasn't a phase. This wasn't teenage rebellion or young adult self-absorption. My daughter genuinely couldn't stand to be seen with me. She was ashamed of what I looked like, and that shame ran so deep she was willing to cut me out of the most important moments of her life. The wedding planning continued without me. I'd get occasional texts with updates. The wedding is June 15th at the Ashford Country Club. Colors are blush and gold. Ceremony starts at 4. Information delivered like she was updating a distant acquaintance, not her mother. I tried one more time to be involved. Called her and said I'd love to help with the guest list or the favors or anything she needed. Just tell me what I can do, sweetheart. I want to help. Actually, Mom, there is something we need to talk about. The seating chart. Finally, something I could contribute to. Of course. Where would you like me to sit? I was thinking maybe I could sit with. You're going to be at table 17. In the back. Near the catering area. I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Table 17. It's a very nice table. You'll have a great view of the ceremony. Vivienne, that's where the vendors sit. That's where the photographers and the wedding planner sit between shots. It's where there was space, Mom. I'm your mother. I should be at the family table. In the front. The front tables are reserved for Christopher's family and the wedding party. You'll be more comfortable in the back anyway. Less attention on you. Less attention on me. Because God forbid anyone pay attention to the mother of the bride and her ugly scars. God forbid I be visible in any way at my own daughter's wedding. Vivienne, I raised you alone. I worked 3 jobs to pay for your education. I gave up everything. And I'm supposed to be grateful. She cut me off, her voice rising. You think I asked for any of this? You think I asked for a mother who looks like a monster? The word hit me like a physical blow. Monster. My daughter had just called me a monster. I saved your life, I whispered. These scars are from saving your life. And I've had to live with the consequences ever since. Do you know what it's like having a mother people point at? Having kids at school call you, daughter of the monster. I spent my whole life making up for your face. And now, on my wedding day, I just want one day where I can be happy without having to worry about you ruining it. I would never ruin your wedding. You ruin everything just by existing in it. That's the truth, Mom. I'm sorry if it hurts, but it's the truth. You're going to sit at table 17 in the back, and you're going to stay out of the photos, and if you can't do that, then maybe you shouldn't come at all. She hung up, and I sat there with the phone in my hand, feeling like I'd been hollowed out. Like someone had reached inside my chest and torn out everything vital and left me empty. My daughter thought I was a monster. My daughter, whose life I'd saved, who I'd sacrificed everything for, actually believed I ruined things by existing. And somehow, impossibly, it was about to get even worse. Because that conversation was 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks before my daughter would look me in the eye, spit at my feet, and kick me out of the ceremony entirely. But before I tell you about that day, about the moment everything truly shattered, I need to know. Have you ever loved someone who was ashamed of you? Have you ever sacrificed everything only to be told it wasn't enough? Drop your answer in the comments, because I know I can't be the only one who's felt this kind of pain. And if this story is hitting you in any way, if you're feeling even a fraction of what I felt, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next at the wedding, and what happens to Vivienne in the months after, it's something you need to hear. Trust me, you're not ready for where this is going. Now let me tell you about the worst day of my life. The morning of June 15th, I woke up at 5 a.m. even though I'd barely slept. My stomach was in knots, had been for days, but I told myself it would be okay. Had to be okay. This was my daughter's wedding day. No matter how much distance had grown between us, no matter how many hurtful things had been said, I was still her mother. And mothers show up. I'd spent money, I didn't have to make sure I looked perfect. Not just good. Perfect. Because maybe, just maybe, if I looked good enough, Vivienne wouldn't be ashamed. Maybe she'd see me walk in and feel proud instead of horrified. Maybe this could be the day that changed everything between us. I'd hired a professional makeup artist. Found her through a support group for burn survivors, a woman named Elena who specialized in covering severe scarring. She'd come to my apartment at 6 in the morning, her arms full of products and tools, and she'd spent 2.5 hours on my face. Layer after layer of primer, color corrector, foundation, concealer, powder. She worked carefully around the textured areas where the skin was raised and tight, blending everything seamlessly. When she finally let me look in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. The scars were still visible. You can't completely hide third-degree burns, no matter how skilled the makeup artist. But they were softened, muted. The angry red and purple tones were covered with something closer to my natural skin color. The texture was still there if you looked closely, but from a distance, in the right light, I almost looked normal. "You look beautiful," Elena said, and I could hear that she meant it. "Your daughter is going to be so happy." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. The dress had cost me $800. $800 I'd saved over 6 months, working extra shifts, skipping meals, putting every spare penny aside. It was pale lavender, which Elena said would complement the makeup tones. Tea-length, modest, with 3/4 sleeves that covered my arm scars. A high neckline that covered my neck and décolletage. I'd had it altered 3 times to make sure it fit perfectly. Hugged my body in all the right places without being too tight or too loose. When I put it on and looked in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in 24 years. Felt pretty. Not beautiful maybe. Not the way I was before the fire. But pretty enough. Presentable. Like a mother who could stand next to her daughter without causing people to recoil. I'd even splurged on professional hairstyling. My hair, which I usually just pulled back in a simple bun for work, was swept up in an elegant twist with small pearl pins scattered throughout. Real pearls, borrowed from Dorothy, who'd insisted I wear something that made me feel special. I looked in the mirror one final time before leaving my apartment. The woman staring back at me had cost almost $1,000 to create. Every penny I could spare. Every bit of effort I could muster. Because I wanted Vivienne to look at me and not be embarrassed. I wanted to be the mother she could be proud of, even if just for one day. The drive to the Ashford Country Club took 45 minutes. It was a perfect June day, sunny but not too hot, with a light breeze that made the trees sway gently. The kind of day people dream about for outdoor weddings. I drove carefully, terrified of smudging my makeup or wrinkling my dress. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The Ashford Country Club was exactly what you'd expect from a venue that cost $75,000 to book. It sat on 200 acres of pristine lawn and gardens, with a main building that looked like something out of a European postcard. White stone, massive columns, windows that sparkled in the sunlight. There were already cars in the circular driveway when I arrived, expensive cars with out-of-state plates. Christopher's family and their guests, I assumed. I parked in the back lot, not wanting to presume I deserved one of the closer spots. Checked my makeup one more time in the rearview mirror. Still looked good. The scars were still covered. Could do this. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse and walked toward the main entrance. The moment I stepped through those doors, I felt it. That shift in the atmosphere that happens when people notice something that doesn't fit. The entrance hall was full of guests, early arrivals mingling with glasses of champagne, and when I walked in, conversations faltered. Not stopped completely but faltered. That momentary pause while people processed what they were seeing. A woman in an expensive-looking cocktail dress was mid-sentence with her companion when her eyes landed on me. She stopped talking. Just stopped, her mouth slightly open, staring at my face. Trying to figure out what was wrong with it. The makeup covered a lot, but it couldn't hide the texture, the way the skin pulled differently on the left side, the slight asymmetry that no amount of contouring could fix. Her companion turned to see what she was looking at. Then he stared too. I kept walking, head up, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. More heads turned. More conversations paused. I could hear the whispers starting, that low murmur of people who think they're being discreet but really aren't. Is that? Oh my God, what happened to her? Do you think those are burn scars? How terrible. I'd lived with this for 24 years. I should have been used to it. But somehow, in this place, surrounded by these people in their designer clothes and their perfect faces, it felt worse than usual. More pointed. More cruel. I made it halfway across the entrance hall when Patricia appeared. Christopher's mother, wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my car. Her blonde hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She saw me and her smile froze for just a second before she rearranged her face into an expression of polite welcome. Margaret. She said my name like it tasted bad. Unique look. Very brave of you. Brave. Like wearing makeup and a nice dress to my daughter's wedding was some kind of courageous act. Like I was a wounded soldier showing up to a formal event instead of a mother celebrating her child's marriage. Thank you, Patricia. You look lovely. Well, one does try. She glanced around, as if checking to see who was watching this interaction. Vivienne is in the bridal suite. Second floor, east wing. Though I'm not sure she's receiving visitors yet. So much to do before the ceremony. The clear implication, you're not really wanted here. Stay out of the way. But I didn't come all this way to stay out of the way. I didn't spend $1,000 on my appearance and 24 years raising my daughter alone to be invisible on her wedding day. So I thanked Patricia with a smile that felt like it might crack my face, and I headed toward the staircase. The east wing was quieter, away from the main gathering areas. I could hear female voices and laughter coming from behind a set of double doors at the end of the hall. The bridal suite. Paused outside listening. Vivienne's voice, bright and happy, laughing at something one of her bridesmaids had said. She sounded genuinely joyful, more joyful than I'd heard her in years. I knocked softly. Vivienne. Honey, it's Mom. The laughter stopped. Complete silence for 3 long seconds. Then footsteps, and the door opened just a crack. Jessica, one of the bridesmaids, peered out at me. She was stunning, with glossy dark hair and the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. When she saw my face, her eyes widened slightly. Oh, Mrs. Chen. Hi. I'd love to see Vivienne. Just for a moment. Jessica glanced back over her shoulder, clearly waiting for instruction. I heard Vivienne's voice, tight and stressed. Who is it? It's your mom. Another pause. Then, let her in. Jessica opened the door wider, and I stepped into the bridal suite. It was beautiful, all white and gold, with huge windows overlooking the gardens. And in the center of the room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, was my daughter. She looked like a princess. Her wedding dress was stunning. Some designer creation with delicate lace and beading that caught the light every time she moved. Her hair was styled in loose waves, half up and half down, with small white flowers woven throughout. Her makeup was perfect, highlighting her natural beauty without being overdone. She looked radiant. She looked happy. And then she turned and saw me, and her face transformed into an expression of pure, absolute horror. Not surprise. Not annoyance. Horror. Like I just walked in covered in blood or wielding a weapon. Her mouth fell open slightly, her eyes went wide, and I watched all the color drain from her face. Mom. She breathed the word like a curse. What did you do to your face? I touched my cheek self-consciously, suddenly worried the makeup had smudged during the drive. I hired a professional makeup artist. I wanted to look nice for your big day. Nice. Her voice was rising, getting shrill. Nice. That makeup makes the scars look worse. You look like you're wearing a mask. Like some kind of love. She didn't finish the sentence, but I could see it in her eyes. Some kind of monster. That's what she was thinking. The bridesmaids had all gone silent, frozen in place like they'd stumbled into a live grenade situation. Jessica, Amanda, and Caroline, all 3 of them beautiful and perfect, watching this unfold with horrified fascination. None of them said anything. None of them came to my defense. Vivienne, sweetheart, I just wanted to look my best for you. Your best. She was fully yelling now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You look like a freak. I specifically told you to stay in the background. I told you to be invisible. And you show up looking like that. I felt like I'd been slapped. The makeup that had taken 2.5 hours and hundreds of dollars, the dress I'd saved for months to buy, the hair that I'd had professionally styled, all of it was wrong. All of it made me look worse, apparently. I was trying so hard, and it still wasn't enough. I'm your mother, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I could feel tears starting to burn in my eyes. I have every right to be here. To be part of this day. You have the right to be here, sure. But you don't have the right to embarrass me. Look at you. You can't even see how ridiculous you look. All that makeup just draws more attention to the scars, not less. Everyone downstairs was staring at you. I heard them whispering. Do you know how that makes me feel? How that makes you feel? Something in me snapped. Vivienne, these scars are from saving your life. I ran through fire for you. I gave up my face, my body, my entire life so you could survive. And you're angry at me for embarrassing you. And I've had to live with the consequences ever since. She screamed it, her face red now, tears starting to streak her makeup. Do you know what it's like having a mother people point at? Having kids at school call you daughter of the monster. Having to explain over and over again why my mother looks like that. The word monster hung in the air between us. She'd said it before on the phone, but hearing it now in person in front of witnesses, it hit differently. It was real in a way it hadn't been before. I spent my whole life making up for your face, she continued, her voice breaking. Do you understand that? My whole life trying to be perfect enough, pretty enough, successful enough to make up for having a mother who looks like she crawled out of a nightmare. And today, the one day that's supposed to be about me and Christopher and our future, you couldn't even do me the courtesy of staying hidden. I opened my mouth to respond, but I couldn't find words. What do you say to that? How do you defend yourself against your own child calling you a nightmare? All I asked, Vivienne said, her voice dropping to something quiet and vicious, was that you stay in the background. Sit at your table in the back. Don't be in photos. Let me have one day where I don't have to think about you and your scars and how everyone reacts when they see you. But you couldn't even do that, could you? You had to make a spectacle of yourself with that ridiculous makeup and that desperate attempt to look normal. I am normal, I whispered. I'm just a mother who wanted to celebrate her daughter's wedding. You're not normal. You'll never be normal. And I can't do this anymore. I can't spend my whole life managing other people's reactions to you. I can't spend my marriage explaining why my mother looks the way she does. I can't. And then she did something I'll never forget as long as I live. She looked directly at me, her face twisted with disgust and rage, and she spat at my feet. Not near my feet. Them. I felt the saliva hit the top of my shoe, warm and deliberate. A gesture of complete contempt. The kind of thing you do to someone you despise, not to someone you love. Not to the person who gave you life. The bridesmaids gasped. Jessica actually put her hand over her mouth. But none of them moved to stop what was happening. They just watched like spectators at a car crash. Vivienne, I said, my voice shaking. Please don't do this. She moved toward me then, and for a second I thought she might actually hit me. Her hands came up and I flinched, but instead of striking my face she shoved my shoulders. Hard. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the edge of the carpet, and I nearly fell. Would have fallen if I hadn't caught myself on the back of a chair. Get out, she hissed. You're not in my wedding. You're not in my photos. You're not sitting in the ceremony. If you truly loved me, if you cared about me at all, you'd understand that some sacrifices mean staying invisible. You'd understand that the best thing you could do for me is to not exist where people can see you. I stared at her. This stranger in a wedding dress who used to be my little girl. The child I'd rocked to sleep every night. The child I'd worked myself to exhaustion for. The child I'd literally burned for. And she was looking at me like I was garbage. Like I was something toxic she needed to remove from her life. You want me to leave? I could barely get the words out. Your own mother. Yes, I want you to leave. I want you to get in your car and drive back to your apartment and let me have this day without you ruining it. That's what I want. I saved your life. It was all I could think to say. The one irrefutable truth between us. You would have died in that fire if I hadn't. I know. She screamed it so loud I jumped. I know you saved my life. You've been holding that over my head for 24 years. I saved you, I sacrificed for you. Look what I gave up for you. But you know what? I never asked you to do that. I never asked you to run into that fire. I never asked for a mother with scars. And I'm tired of feeling guilty about it. I'm tired of owing you. I'm tired of you. The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe properly. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. My daughter couldn't actually be kicking me out of her wedding. Not after everything. Not after all of it. But she was. If you're still here in 60 seconds, Vivienne said, her voice cold now, eerily calm, I'll have security escort you out. Your choice. I looked at the bridesmaids, desperate for anyone to say something. To tell Vivienne she was being cruel. To stand up for me. But they all looked away. Jessica studied her fingernails. Amanda suddenly became very interested in adjusting her dress. Caroline looked at the floor. No one was going to help me. Vivienne, I tried one more time, my voice barely above a whisper. Please. I'm your mother. Then act like it, she snapped. Act like a mother who actually cares about her daughter's happiness instead of one who needs to make everything about her pain and her sacrifice. Leave. Now. Left. I turned around and walked out of that bridal suite with my head down, tears streaming down my face, ruining the expensive makeup. I walked down that hallway with my vision blurry, barely able to see where I was going. I walked down the grand staircase with my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles went white, because if I didn't hold on to something I was going to collapse. And everyone in that entrance hall watched me leave. The conversations had started up again while I'd been upstairs, the guests mingling and laughing and celebrating. But as I descended those stairs, clearly crying, clearly devastated, the hall went quiet again. Every single person turned to watch the mother of the bride flee the wedding in tears. I saw Christopher standing near the bar with a group of men in expensive suits. His groomsmen probably. He saw me. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw guilt flash across his face. He knew what his fiancé had done. He knew his future wife had just kicked her own mother out of the wedding. And he didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just looked away, like if he pretended not to see me. He wouldn't have to feel bad about it. Patricia was near the entrance, holding court with a group of older women who were probably her friends from the country club. She saw me coming and actually smiled. A small, satisfied smile, like this was exactly what she'd been expecting. Like I'd confirmed everything she thought about me. Leaving so soon, Margaret, she called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. What a shame. I do hope everything is all right. She knew damn well everything was not all right. She could see me crying. She could see me fleeing. And she was enjoying it. I didn't answer her. Couldn't answer her. If I tried to speak, I'd break down completely. And I wasn't going to give these people the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart in public. So I just kept walking, kept moving toward the door, toward my car, toward escape. The June sunshine felt obscene when I stepped outside. How dare it be such a beautiful day when my world was ending? How dare the birds sing and the breeze blow gently and the flowers bloom when my daughter had just told me she was tired of me? When she'd literally spat at my feet. I made it to my car in the back parking lot. Got inside. Locked the doors. And then I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. Screamed until I couldn't make sound anymore. Then I cried. I cried so hard I thought I might vomit. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my chest hurt, until the expensive makeup was completely destroyed and my face was just a mess of smeared foundation and tears and ruined skin underneath. I don't know how long I sat in that parking lot. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been an hour. Time didn't feel real anymore. Nothing felt real. This whole day felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Eventually I started driving. I don't even remember the drive home. I was on autopilot, my body going through the motions while my mind replayed the scene in the bridal suite over and over. The horror on Vivienne's face. The word monster. The spit hitting my shoe. Push. The coldness in her voice when she told me to leave. Some sacrifices mean staying invisible. That's what she'd said. That my sacrifice, the sacrifice of my face and my body and my entire life, meant I should hide. Stay out of sight. Not embarrass her with my existence. I made it back to my apartment and sat in my car in the parking lot for another 20 minutes. I couldn't make myself go inside. Because once I went inside, once I was alone in that empty apartment, I'd have to face the truth. I'd have to accept that my daughter hated me. That the person I loved most in the world, the person I'd given everything for, couldn't stand to look at me. When I finally went inside, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was destroyed. Makeup streaked and smeared, mascara running in black rivers down my cheeks, foundation caked and cracking around my scars. I looked exactly like what Vivienne had called me. Monster. Freak. Something that should stay hidden. I went to the bathroom and washed it all off. Layer after layer of expensive makeup that was supposed to make me presentable, swirling down the drain. And when it was all gone, when I was back to just my scarred face with nothing to hide behind, I looked at myself for a long time. These scars were the price I paid for my daughter's life. Every ridge of raised tissue, every patch of discolored skin, every pulled and twisted area was bought with my pain. With my sacrifice. I'd worn them for 24 years like a badge of love, telling myself that one day Vivienne would understand. One day she'd appreciate what I'd given up for her. But she didn't understand. She never would. Because to her, these scars weren't proof of love. They were proof of her burden, her embarrassment, her cross to bear. I took off the expensive dress and hung it in the closet. I'd never wear it again. Couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. I put on old sweatpants and a t-shirt, and I climbed into bed even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Even though my daughter's wedding ceremony was probably starting right about now. Even though I should have been sitting in that venue, watching her marry the man she loved. But I wasn't there. Because she didn't want me there. Because my love wasn't enough. My sacrifice wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I stayed in bed for 3 days. Didn't go to work. Didn't answer my phone. Didn't eat. Just lay there in the dark, replaying everything over and over, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Trying to figure out how to survive loving someone who couldn't love you back. Dorothy finally showed up on day 4, let herself in with the spare key I'd given her, found me still in bed. She didn't say anything. Just climbed in next to me, put her arm around me, and let me cry on her shoulder until I had nothing left. She called me a monster, I whispered into Dorothy's shoulder. My own daughter called me a monster. I know, honey. I know. I saved her life. I gave up everything. And she spat at me. I know. How do I come back from this? How do I survive this? Dorothy was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't know. But you will. Because you're stronger than you think. And because you deserve better than a daughter who can't see your worth. But I didn't feel strong. Felt destroyed. I felt like Vivienne had reached into my chest and pulled out everything vital, everything that made me want to keep living, and thrown it away like garbage. The wedding had happened without me. My daughter had gotten married, had probably looked beautiful walking down the aisle, had probably smiled and laughed and celebrated with all those guests who'd watched me flee in tears. And she probably hadn't thought about me once. Probably hadn't felt even a moment of regret or guilt or sadness that her mother wasn't there. I was so sure that was the end. That Vivienne and I were done forever. That I'd never hear from her again except maybe a cold, perfunctory phone call on major holidays. I'd accepted that my daughter was gone, that I'd lost her to her shame and her cruelty and her inability to see me as anything other than an embarrassment. But here's what I didn't know. Here's what I couldn't have predicted. That wedding day, the day Vivienne kicked me out and told me to stay invisible, that was just the beginning of her story. Not the end of mine. Because karma, real karma, it doesn't happen quickly. Doesn't strike like lightning. It builds slowly like water eroding stone, until one day everything crumbles all at once. And Vivienne's perfect life. Her perfect marriage to her perfect wealthy husband in his perfect wealthy family. It was about to crumble. And when it did, when everything she'd chosen over me fell apart, she'd finally understand what she'd done. What she'd lost. What she'd thrown away. But that revelation, that moment of reckoning, it would come too late to undo the damage. Some things once broken can never be fully repaired. Some words once spoken can never be taken back. Some moments once destroyed are gone forever. Have you ever been rejected by someone you loved more than life itself? Have you ever given everything and been told it wasn't enough, that you weren't enough? Let me know in the comments because I know I'm not alone in this pain. And if you want to know what happened next, if you want to know how Vivienne's perfect life fell apart and whether we ever found our way back to each other, hit that subscribe button right now. Because the next part of this story, the karma that was waiting for my daughter, it's something you won't want to miss. Trust me, what happened in the months after that wedding. Vivienne would give anything to undo it all. You know what the cruelest part of heartbreak is? It's not the moment itself. It's the weeks that follow. The days that stretch into eternity while you wait for an apology that never comes. The silence that screams louder than any words ever could. After I left that wedding, after I drove home with my face streaked in ruined makeup and my heart shattered into a million pieces, I kept thinking Vivienne would call. I kept thinking that once the wedding day high wore off, once she was alone with her thoughts, she'd realize what she'd done. She'd realize she'd kicked her own mother out of the most important day of her life. She'd realize she'd spat at the feet of the woman who'd literally burned for her. I was wrong. The first week after the wedding, I checked my phone every 5 minutes. Every notification made my heart jump. Every time it rang, I lunged for it, hoping to see her name on the screen. But it was never her. It was Dorothy checking on me. It was work, wondering when I'd be back. It was spam calls about my car's extended warranty. But never Vivienne. Week 2 I stopped checking so obsessively. But I still hoped. Still waited. They'd be on their honeymoon, I told myself. Some 2-week luxury vacation to the Maldives or Bora Bora or wherever rich people go to celebrate their marriages. She'd call when she got back. She'd have had time to think, time to reflect, time to realize how badly she'd hurt me. But week 3 came and went. Then week 4. Then 2 months. And my phone stayed silent. I couldn't work. I'd try to go to my shifts at the restaurant, put on my chef's coat, stand at my station, and within an hour I'd be crying into the prep sink. Antonio, my boss, a kind man who'd employed me for 15 years, finally pulled me aside and told me to take some time off. Whatever's going on, Margaret, you need to deal with it. Come back when you're ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like ash in my mouth. I'd lost 12 pounds in 6 weeks. And I was already thin to begin with. My clothes hung off me like I was a scarecrow. Dorothy brought me groceries, tried to make me eat, but most of it went bad in my refrigerator while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over and over. You're not seriously planning to be in my wedding photos looking like that, are you? The spit hitting my shoe. Some sacrifices mean staying invisible. I'm tired of you. I couldn't escape it. Those words played on a loop in my head, a soundtrack to my destruction. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, gasping for air, feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of her rejection. I'd sit in the dark of my bedroom and wonder where I'd gone wrong, what I could have done differently, how I could have been a better mother. How I could have hidden better, stayed smaller, been less embarrassing. Dorothy was my lifeline during those weeks. She came over almost every day. This beautiful soul who understood pain in a way most people never would. Dorothy had been burned in a house fire when she was 19, lost most of her right arm and shoulder, wore the scars on her neck and face like I did. We'd met at a support group for burn survivors 10 years ago, and she'd become more than a friend. She'd become the sister I never had. She'd sit with me in my dark apartment, hold my hand, let me cry until I had nothing left. And when I'd finally quiet down, exhausted from sobbing, she'd say the things I needed to hear. "You gave her life twice," Dorothy told me one afternoon, sitting on the edge of my bed while I lay there like a corpse. "Once when you gave birth to her. Once when you ran through those flames. You gave her everything, Margaret. Your face, your body, your entire existence has been about making sure she had a good life. And if she can't see that, if she's so blinded by vanity and shame that she can't recognize the most profound act of love a mother can give, then that's her loss. Not yours." "But it doesn't feel like her loss," I whispered. "It feels like mine. I lost my daughter." "No," Dorothy said firmly. "She lost her mother. She threw away something precious and irreplaceable. And one day she's going to realize that. One day, something's going to happen that makes her understand exactly what she gave up. And when that day comes, when she finally sees clearly, it's going to destroy her." I wanted to believe Dorothy. I wanted to believe that Vivienne would wake up one day and feel the weight of what she'd done. But part of me, the broken part that had been rejected and spat on and called a monster, that part didn't believe she cared enough to ever feel regret. 3 months after the wedding, I finally did something I should have done weeks earlier. I wrote Vivienne a letter. Not an angry letter. Not a vengeful screed about what a terrible daughter she was. I didn't have that kind of energy. I was too tired, too broken, too hollowed out for anger. So instead I wrote her the truth. The whole truth. Everything I'd never been able to say to her face because she never gave me the chance. I wrote about the fire. Not just the facts she already knew, but the details I'd never shared. The smell of my own skin burning. The way I'd felt my dress melting into my arm. The moment I thought we were both going to die, but I kept moving anyway because she was my baby and I'd rather burn alive than let her suffer. I wrote about the 4 months in the hospital, the surgeries, the infections, the times I begged nurses to let me die because the pain was so unbearable. I wrote about Richard leaving. About how I'd watched the man I loved walk away because he couldn't look at me anymore. About raising her alone while working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, living with chronic pain that never stopped. About every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd given up, every moment of my life that had been dedicated to making sure she had everything she needed. I wrote about loving her. About how being her mother was the greatest joy of my life, even when she was pulling away from me. Even when she was asking me to drop her off blocks from school. Even when she was pretending I didn't exist. I wrote about how I understood she was young, that she didn't ask for any of this, that I didn't blame her for struggling with having a mother who looked different. But then I wrote about the wedding. About the cruelty of that moment. About how she'd looked at me with disgust and called me a monster. About the spit at my feet. About being pushed and told to leave. About walking out of that bridal suite while my heart broke into pieces so small I wasn't sure they could ever be put back together. And I ended the letter with this. "Vivienne, I don't need you to thank me for saving your life. I don't need you to be grateful for my sacrifices. I would do it all again, every painful moment, because you are my daughter and I love you. But I need you to understand that love should never require someone to be invisible. Love should never demand that someone erase themselves to make room for your comfort. These scars are part of me. They always will be. And if you can't accept that, if you can't look at me without shame, then I don't know how we move forward from here. But I want you to know that I forgive you. Even if you never forgive yourself, I forgive you. Because that's what mothers do. We love our children even when they break our hearts." I mailed that letter on a Tuesday morning. Put it in the mailbox outside my apartment building and watched the mailman collect it an hour later. And then I waited. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. Then a month. The letter went unanswered. Vivienne never called. Never wrote back. Never acknowledged that she'd received it. It was like I'd sent my heart out into the void and the void had swallowed it whole. That silence hurt more than anything she'd said to me at the wedding. Because at least at the wedding, she'd been present. She'd been angry and cruel, but she'd been there. This silence was different. This silence said I wasn't even worth responding to. I wasn't even worth the effort of a phone call or a text message or a single sentence acknowledging my pain. I started to accept that this was it. This was how our story ended. Not with some dramatic confrontation or tearful reconciliation, but with silence, with absence, with me alone in my apartment, working my shifts at the restaurant, going through the motions of living while feeling dead inside. But here's the thing about karma. Real karma, the kind that actually matters, it doesn't work on our timeline. It doesn't strike immediately after someone does something wrong. Builds, waits, watches. And then, when the person least expects it, when they think they've gotten away with their cruelty, it comes for them. And it came for Vivienne. 3 months after the wedding, I started hearing things. Not from Vivienne directly, of course. She still wasn't speaking to me. But through the grapevine, through mutual acquaintances, through the restaurant manager whose wife knew someone who knew someone in Christopher's social circle. Information trickled down to me in bits and pieces, and I started to understand that my daughter's perfect life was beginning to crack. It started with Christopher's parents, Patricia and Robert, those pillars of old money society who'd never thought Vivienne was quite good enough for their precious son. The same people Vivienne had been desperate to impress. The same people she'd sacrificed me for. They started making comments. Subtle at first, then increasingly pointed. Comments about Vivienne's background. Comments about her family situation. Comments that made it very clear they'd done their research and found me wanting. I heard about it from Linda, the restaurant manager, whose wife Carol played tennis at the same club as Patricia. Carol had been at a dinner party 6 weeks after the wedding. One of those formal affairs where the upper crust gathered to drink expensive wine and gossip about people they considered beneath them. And Patricia, after her 3rd glass of champagne, had started talking about her new daughter-in-law. "Christopher, darling," she'd said, loud enough for half the table to hear. "Are you absolutely certain about Vivienne's genetics? That mother of hers." Carol said the table had gone quiet. One of those awkward silences where everyone knows something inappropriate is being said but no one wants to be the one to address it. Vivienne had been sitting right there, next to Christopher, probably hoping the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "My mother's scars are from an accident," Vivienne had said, her voice tight. Defensive. Fire. She was burned saving my life. And Patricia had laughed. Carol described it as this cruel, tinkling laugh. The kind that's designed to make you feel small. "Oh, we know all about the fire, dear. But what kind of mother lets herself get so disfigured? Couldn't she have had surgeries? Skin grafts? Something to make herself more presentable? Presentable. Like my scars were a choice. Like I decided to look this way instead of undergoing dozens of surgeries, multiple skin grafts, years of reconstructive procedures that only did so much because 3rd-degree burns over 40% of your body don't just disappear with medical intervention. Christopher hadn't defended Vivienne, according to Carol. He just sat there staring at his plate, while his mother eviscerated the woman he'd supposedly loved enough to marry. And Vivienne, my daughter who'd been so desperate to fit into this world, had to sit there and take it. Had to smile politely and change the subject and pretend her heart wasn't breaking. The irony was almost poetic. Vivienne had rejected me because she was ashamed of how I looked. She'd pushed me out of her life because she thought I embarrassed her. And now the very people she'd been trying to impress, the people she'd chosen over me, were using me as ammunition against her. They were judging her for having a mother with scars, the same way she judged me for having them. But it got worse. Christopher started pulling away. Working late more often. Coming home after Vivienne was already asleep. Making excuses not to spend time with her on weekends. They'd been married less than 4 months, and already the cracks in their perfect relationship were showing. Vivienne tried to ignore it at first. Tried to convince herself it was just the stress of his new position at his father's law firm. But then she made a mistake. She picked up his phone one day when he was in the shower, and she read his text messages. I don't know exactly what those messages said. I wasn't there. I didn't see them. But I heard about it afterward, through the same network of gossip and mutual connections. Apparently, Christopher had been texting his friends, complaining about Vivienne, complaining about her baggage, about her difficult family situation. About how his mother was right. Maybe he'd made a mistake marrying someone from such a questionable background. He'd literally used the word mistake. My daughter, who was beautiful and smart and accomplished, who'd graduated summa cum laude and could have had any man she wanted, was being called a mistake by her own husband. The same husband she'd pushed her mother away for. The same husband whose family she'd desperately tried to please by erasing me from her life. And the most devastating part, she couldn't call me. She couldn't pick up the phone and tell her mother that her marriage was falling apart, that the people she'd chosen over me were destroying her from the inside out. Because she'd burned that bridge. She'd spat at my feet and told me to stay invisible. And now, when she needed a mother's comfort most, she was alone. The universe has a funny way of teaching us lessons. Vivienne had thought that by removing me from her life, by hiding the embarrassing parts of her history, she could build a perfect existence. Perfect marriage. Perfect family. Perfect acceptance into a world that she thought valued beauty and status above everything else. But that world was a lie. Those people were never going to accept her, no matter how hard she tried. No matter how much she sacrificed. Because people like Patricia and Robert, people who judge others based on appearance and background and social standing, they'll always find something to criticize. They'll always find a reason you're not quite good enough. Vivienne had given up the one person who loved her unconditionally. The one person who would have stood by her through anything. And for what? For a husband who called her a mistake. For in-laws who mocked her mother at dinner parties. For a world that was never going to see her as an equal no matter what she did. 4 months after the wedding, I heard that Vivienne and Christopher were in marriage counseling. For months. Most couples don't need therapy until they've been together for years, but Vivienne's perfect marriage was already crumbling. And I wish I could say I felt vindicated. I wish I could say I was happy to see her suffering the way she'd made me suffer. But I wasn't. Because even after everything she'd done to me, even after the cruelty and the rejection and the spit at my feet, she was still my daughter. And watching your child suffer, even when they've broken your heart, it doesn't feel like justice. Feels like drowning. I wanted to call her. God, I wanted to call her so badly. I wanted to tell her that I understood, that I knew what it felt like to be judged for something you couldn't control, that I forgave her and I was here if she needed me. But I didn't. Because Dorothy was right about something else she'd told me during those dark weeks after the wedding. Margaret, she'd said, you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can't love someone into loving you back. Vivienne has to figure this out on her own. She has to hit bottom before she can start climbing back up. And if you keep trying to rescue her, if you keep making yourself available no matter how badly she treats you, she'll never learn. She'll never understand what she lost. So I stayed silent. I went to work. Came home. I lived my life. And I waited to see if my daughter would finally understand that the mother she'd rejected, the mother she'd been ashamed of, was the only person who'd ever loved her without conditions. Do you think Vivienne deserved what happened to her? Or was karma too cruel? Drop your answer in the comments and make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happens next, the moment Vivienne finally realizes what she's lost, it's going to break your heart all over again. The thing about rock bottom is that you don't always recognize it when you're falling. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes losing everything before you finally understand what actually mattered. And Vivienne, she was about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. You want to know when people finally see clearly. When they lose everything. When the perfect life they built on lies and shame and rejection crumbles into dust around them. That's when the scales fall from their eyes. That's when they finally understand what they had and what they threw away. For Vivienne, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, 5 months after her wedding. She was alone in the apartment she shared with Christopher. A beautiful place, of course. 1,200 square feet in a luxury building with floor-to-ceiling windows and marble countertops, and all the trappings of the wealthy life she'd married into. But Christopher wasn't there. He was never there anymore. Always working late. Always having drinks with colleagues. Always finding reasons to be anywhere except home with his wife. And Vivienne, my beautiful daughter who'd sacrificed her mother for this life, was sitting on the floor of her pristine living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She was unpacking things from storage, things she'd kept boxed up since moving in because Christopher said they didn't match the aesthetic of the apartment. Her old belongings. Her memories. The pieces of her life from before she became Mrs. Christopher Palmer. In one of those boxes she found a photo album. Old, worn at the edges, the kind with the sticky pages and plastic covers that people don't really use anymore. She'd made it in high school, a collection of photos from her childhood. She hadn't looked at it in years. She opened it. And there I was. First page. A photo of me holding her when she was 3 days old. This was before the fire, when I still looked like myself. My face was smooth, unmarked, smiling down at this tiny bundle in my arms with an expression of pure wonder. You could see it in my eyes, how much I loved her. How completely she'd already captured my heart. Vivienne stared at that photo for a long time, running her finger over my face, over the mother she'd never really known. She turned the page. There was a photo from her kindergarten graduation. I was in the back row, barely visible, my scarred face partially hidden behind another parent. But I was there. Been there. Even though Vivienne had asked me to stay out of sight, I'd shown up because I wanted to witness her milestones. Another page. Her middle school science fair. There I was again, standing far to the side, trying to be invisible like she'd asked, but present. Always present. My eyes locked on her project, pride written all over my scarred face. Her 8th grade graduation photo. The one where she was standing stiff and uncomfortable next to me, not quite smiling. You could see her body language, how she was leaning away from me, creating distance even in a still image. And you could see my face, how I was trying so hard to smile, to look happy, even though I knew my daughter was ashamed to be photographed with me. High school plays. I was in the audience, always in the back row, watching her perform. College move-in day. I was there, helping her carry boxes, my scarred arms straining with the weight while she walked ahead, pretending we weren't together. Her college graduation. I was in the crowd, standing up and cheering while everyone else sat and clapped politely, my scarred face beaming with pride even though she'd barely acknowledged me afterward. Page after page after page. And in every single photo I was there. In the background, in the shadows, on the periphery of her life. But there. Always there. Even when she didn't want me to be. Even when she asked me to stay away. I showed up. I witnessed her life. I loved her from a distance because distance was all she'd allow. Vivienne told me later, months later when we finally talked about this, that something broke in her looking at those photos. She'd spent so many years pushing me away, being ashamed of how I looked, treating me like an embarrassment. And she'd convinced herself that I was the problem. That my scars were the problem. That if I just looked different, everything would be fine. But looking at those photos, seeing the evidence of my constant presence, my unwavering love, she finally understood. The problem was never my scars. The problem was her. Her shame. Her cruelty. Her inability to see past the surface to the heart underneath. She closed the photo album and reached for another box. This one had her wedding planning materials. Seating charts, invitation samples, vendor contracts, and at the bottom, the thing she'd been both dreading and anticipating, the wedding photo album. It had arrived 2 weeks ago. She'd barely looked at it. Christopher had flipped through it once, made some comment about how nice everything looked, and then put it on the shelf. But Vivienne hadn't really examined it. Hadn't really processed what was in those photos. She opened it now. The first page was a photo of her and Christopher at the altar, exchanging vows. They looked beautiful, perfect, like something out of a magazine. Her dress was stunning. His suit was impeccable, the lighting was flawless. Everything about the image was exactly what she'd wanted. She turned the page. More photos of them. The first kiss. Walking down the aisle. Cutting the cake. The first dance. Page after page of her and Christopher, smiling and laughing and celebrating their perfect day. But something felt wrong. Something felt empty. She couldn't quite place it at first, this feeling of wrongness that grew with every page she turned. The photos were beautiful. The day had been perfect. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. And then she reached the section with family photos. There was Christopher with his parents, Patricia in her champagne dress, Robert in his expensive suit, both of them beaming with pride at their son. There was Christopher with his grandparents, his aunts and uncles, his cousins. Photo after photo of the Palmer family, all of them looking wealthy and polished and perfect. And then there were Vivienne's family photos. Except there weren't any. There were photos of her with her bridesmaids. Photos of her with Christopher's family. Photos of her alone, posing in various locations around the venue. But not a single photo of her with her mother. Not one image of the woman who'd raised her, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for her education, who'd sacrificed everything to give her a good life. Because she'd kicked me out. She'd told me to leave. She'd spat at my feet and pushed me and told me I was ruining her wedding just by existing in the same room as her. The absence was glaring. Screamed from every page. Other brides had photos with their mothers, tender moments captured for eternity. Mothers helping with the dress, mothers wiping away happy tears, mothers dancing with their daughters at the reception. But Vivienne's album was void of those moments. There was a hole where I should have been, and no amount of perfect lighting or beautiful flowers could fill it. She stared at those empty spaces, and something inside her cracked wide open. This was what she'd wanted. This was exactly what she'd demanded. A wedding without her embarrassing mother. Photos that didn't include my scarred face. A perfect day where she didn't have to explain or defend or apologize for how I looked. And she'd gotten it. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted. And it felt hollow. Like she'd deleted something essential from her life story, and now the narrative didn't make sense. Vivienne closed the wedding album and sat there on her living room floor, surrounded by boxes and memories and the evidence of her cruelty. And she started to cry. Not delicate tears. Not the pretty crying that women do in movies. She broke down completely. Sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, her whole body shaking, her perfect makeup running down her face in black streaks. She cried for hours. Cried until she was exhausted, until her throat was raw, until she had nothing left. And in the middle of that breakdown, she remembered something. Letter. A letter that had arrived months ago, about a month after the wedding. A letter from me that she'd read the first paragraph of and then thrown in the trash because she didn't want to deal with it. Didn't want to face what she'd done. She got up, still crying, and went to the kitchen. Dug through the recycling bin until she found it, crumpled and stained but still legible. A letter. My heart poured out onto paper. All the things I'd never been able to say to her face. She smoothed it out on the kitchen counter and read it. Really read it this time. Every word. She read about the fire. About the details I'd never shared before. About the pain of the burns, the months in the hospital, the times I'd begged to die because the agony was too much to bear. She read about Richard leaving, about raising her alone, about working myself into exhaustion to give her everything she needed. She read about loving her. About how being her mother was the greatest joy of my life, even when she was pulling away. Even when she was ashamed of me. Even when she couldn't stand to be photographed with me. And then she read the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. I don't regret the scars, Vivienne. I only regret that they made you hate me. I'd burn 1,000 times over to save you. That's what love is. Real love. Unconditional love. The kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return except to be allowed to exist near the person you die for. I hope one day you understand that real beauty isn't what people see on the surface. Real beauty is what people do when no one's watching. Real beauty is sacrifice. And by that measure, darling, I am beautiful. Even if you can't see it. Vivienne collapsed against the counter, the letter clutched in her hand, and cried until she vomited. Because she finally understood. She finally saw what she'd done. What she'd thrown away. What she'd sacrificed for acceptance from people who would never truly accept her. She'd traded the one person who loved her unconditionally for a life that was falling apart. She'd rejected the mother who'd literally burned for her in favor of in-laws who mocked her at dinner parties. She'd chosen shame over love. Appearance over substance. And now, sitting in her expensive apartment that didn't feel like home, married to a man who called her a mistake, she finally understood the cost of that choice. It took her 2 days to work up the courage to come see me. 2 days of crying, of staring at those photos, of reading and rereading my letter until she'd memorized every word. 2 days of building up the nerve to face the mother she'd destroyed. She didn't call first. Didn't text to ask if it was okay to visit. She was probably afraid I'd say no. So she just showed up at my apartment on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced, looking like she'd been through hell. I was home from my shift at the restaurant, sitting on my couch with a cup of tea, watching some mindless TV show. I heard the knock on my door and opened it without thinking, expecting Dorothy or maybe a delivery. Instead, I found my daughter. She looked terrible. She'd lost weight, probably 15 pounds, and she was already thin. Her face was gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Her hair, which was always perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized sweater, no makeup, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked broken. And even after everything she'd done to me, even after the wedding and the cruelty and the months of silence, my first instinct was to pull her into my arms. Because that's what mothers do. When we see our children in pain, we want to fix it, no matter what they've done to us. But I didn't. I stood there in my doorway, one hand on the frame, and I just looked at her, waiting. "Mom," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the word. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. The words were trapped in my throat, tangled up with too many emotions to name. "Can I come in? Please?" I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into my small apartment, this place that was nothing compared to the luxury she now lived in, and she looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The worn furniture, the second-hand decorations, the photos on the walls, most of them of her at various ages, because even after everything, she was still the center of my world. She turned to face me, and tears were already streaming down her face. "I don't know where to start. Why are you here, Vivienne?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. A defense mechanism, because if I let myself feel everything I was feeling, I'd break apart completely. Because I finally understand what I did. What I've been doing my whole life. And I needed to tell you I'm sorry. "You're sorry." I repeated the words, tasting them, testing them. "You're sorry for what exactly? For being ashamed of me. For kicking me out of your wedding. For spitting at my feet. For calling me a monster. Which part are you sorry for, Vivienne?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "All of it. Everything. Every cruel thing I ever said or did. Every time I made you feel less than. Every time I treated you like you were an embarrassment instead of the woman who saved my life. I'm sorry for all of it." "Why now?" "Yes. Why are you sorry now? What changed?" And she told me. Everything. About Christopher's parents and their cruel comments. About Patricia at the dinner party, questioning my choices, implying I'd somehow chosen to be disfigured. About Christopher pulling away, working late, avoiding her. About the text messages she'd found, her own husband calling her a mistake, complaining about her baggage. "You were right," she sobbed. "You've always been right. Those people, the ones I was trying so hard to impress, they're horrible. They're cruel and shallow and judgmental. And they were never going to accept me no matter what I did. No matter how perfect I tried to be. Because they don't care about who I am. They only care about what I look like, where I come from, whether I fit their narrow definition of acceptable. And you're just figuring this out now?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "It took your husband's family being cruel to you for you to understand that judging people based on appearance is wrong. You couldn't figure that out when you were doing it to your own mother." "I know," she whispered. "I know. I was cruel. I was evil. There's no excuse for what I did. No justification. I spent my whole life being ashamed of the wrong thing. I was ashamed of you, of your scars, of how people looked at you. But I should have been ashamed of myself. Of my shallowness. Of my cowardice. Of the fact that I couldn't see past the surface to the person underneath. She moved closer to me, her hands reaching out like she wanted to touch me but wasn't sure if she was allowed. I went through old photos. Photos from my childhood, my school events, my graduation. And you were in all of them, Mom. Every single one. In the background, in the shadows, trying to be invisible like I'd asked. But you were there. You always showed up. Even when I didn't want you to, even when I told you to stay away, you showed up because you loved me. And then I looked at my wedding album, she continued, her voice breaking. And you weren't in a single photo. There's this huge hole where you should be. This absence that screams from every page. I got exactly what I wanted. A wedding without my embarrassing mother. And it felt empty. Felt wrong. Because you weren't there. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Do you know what it feels like? I said slowly, each word measured and heavy. To have your own child look at you with disgust? To see revulsion in the eyes of the person you'd die for? I know, she sobbed. I know, and I can never take it back. I can never undo what I said, what I did. Called you a monster, Mom. I spat at your feet. Pushed you. I told you to stay invisible. I told you that you were ruining my life just by existing. And none of it was true. None of it. She was crying so hard now she could barely speak. You're the bravest person I know. You're beautiful. Not in spite of your scars but because of what they represent. They're proof of your love. They're evidence of your sacrifice. They're the price you paid to save my life. And I treated them like they were something shameful. Yes, I said quietly. You did. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Vivienne said, her voice raw. I know I don't. But I'm asking for it anyway. Not because I've earned it, but because I can't live with what I've done. I can't live knowing I broke the heart of the person who loved me most in this world. I can't live knowing I'm the kind of person who could be that cruel to her own mother. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. This broken, sobbing woman standing in my living room, admitting to everything she'd done wrong. And I thought about forgiveness. About what it means. About what it costs. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It doesn't mean the relationship goes back to what it was before. Forgiveness is a choice. A deliberate decision to release the anger, the bitterness, the desire for revenge, and choose something different instead. But I wasn't ready to make that choice yet. I need time, I said finally. You broke something in me that day, Vivienne. Something I'm not sure can be fixed. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed me. You took every sacrifice I made, every scar I earned saving your life. And you told me they made me worthless. You told me I should be invisible. You told me I was too ugly to be in your photos. Too embarrassing to be acknowledged as your mother. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. So I need time. I need space to figure out if I can get past this. If we can build something new from the ashes of what you burned down. I'm not saying no. But I'm not saying yes either. I'm saying I need time. I'll wait, she said immediately. However long it takes. Years if necessary. I'll wait because you're worth waiting for. Because I threw away something precious. And if there's even a chance I can earn it back, I'll spend the rest of my life trying. She pulled something from her pocket. Business card. There's something I want to do. If you'll let me. I want to meet Dorothy. I want to meet your support group. I want to understand what you went through, what you still go through. I want to hear from other burn survivors about their experiences, their struggles. I want to educate myself about something I should have understood years ago. I took the card surprised. Why? Because I was ignorant. I was privileged and sheltered and so focused on appearance that I never bothered to understand the reality of living with scars. I never asked you about your pain, about your experiences, about what it's like to navigate a world that judges you for something you couldn't control. And if I'm going to change, if I'm going to become the daughter you deserve, I need to start by listening, by learning, by understanding. After she left, I sat on my couch for a long time, holding that business card, thinking about everything she'd said. Part of me wanted to believe her. wanted to believe she'd genuinely changed, that she finally understood what she'd done wrong. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered at that wedding, was afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of opening my heart to someone who'd already proven they could destroy it. 2 weeks later I found out about the post. I don't do social media much. Never saw the point. But Dorothy called me, her voice excited and anxious at the same time. "Margaret, have you seen what Vivienne posted? What are you talking about? Check Facebook. Or Instagram. Or Twitter. It's everywhere." I didn't have Instagram or Twitter, but I had a Facebook account I checked maybe once a month. I logged in, and there it was, shared by at least a dozen people I knew. A post from Vivienne's account that had gone viral. It was a collection of 3 photos. The first was a picture of me from before the fire. Young, smooth-skinned, smiling at the camera with my whole life ahead of me. The second was a picture of me after the fire, my scars visible, my face changed but my eyes still holding that same warmth. And the third was a photo I'd never seen before, one that must have been taken by a neighbor or a paramedic on the night of the fire. It showed me lying on the sidewalk, my body burned and broken, but still holding baby Vivienne in my arms. Still protecting her even as I was dying. And beneath those photos, Vivienne had written a caption that made my hands shake as I read it. "I spent my entire life being ashamed of the wrong thing. This is my mother, Margaret Chen. 24 years ago, she ran into a burning building to save my life. She wrapped her body around mine and ran through flames, sacrificing her face, her arms, her entire future to make sure I survived. She spent 4 months in the hospital. She nearly died multiple times. She endured pain I can't even imagine. And when she finally came home, scarred and changed, she dedicated her life to raising me alone, working 3 jobs, giving me every opportunity while living with chronic pain and the judgment of a world that can't see past the surface. And I thanked her by being ashamed, by hiding her, by asking her to stay invisible, by telling her she was too ugly to be in my wedding photos, by calling her a monster. By spitting at her feet on what should have been one of the happiest days of both our lives. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was shallow and vain and so focused on what people thought of me that I couldn't see the truth. My mother is the bravest, most beautiful person I've ever known. Her scars aren't something to be ashamed of. They're badges of honor. They're proof of her love. They're the price she paid to give me life twice. Once when she gave birth to me, and once when she pulled me from those flames. Real beauty isn't a smooth face or perfect skin. Real beauty is sacrifice. It's love that asks for nothing in return. It's showing up for your child even when that child treats you like you're worthless. It's working yourself to exhaustion to provide opportunities. It's forgiving even when forgiveness hasn't been earned. My mother is beautiful. And I'm sorry it took me 24 years to see it. To everyone who's ever been judged for your scars, your differences, your perceived imperfections, you are not less than. You are not ugly. You are survivors. You are warriors. You are beautiful in ways that matter far more than what's on the surface. And to my mom, if you're reading this, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure the world knows what you did for me. What you sacrificed. What you're worth. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it the way you deserved to hear it. The post had been up for 6 hours when I read it. It already had over 50,000 likes. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of shares. People were calling it the most powerful thing they'd read in years. Burned survivors were sharing their own stories in the comments. Parents were talking about sacrifice. People who'd been ashamed of their own scars were posting photos, saying Vivienne's words had given them courage. But there were also comments condemning Vivienne for how she'd treated me in the first place. Calling her cruel, shallow, ungrateful. Saying she didn't deserve forgiveness. Saying I should cut her out of my life permanently. The post went viral. Within a week, it had been picked up by news outlets. Daughter's heartbreaking apology to burned survivor mother goes viral. Woman admits to decades of cruelty toward mother who saved her life. The story was everywhere. And then Vivienne's life completely fell apart. Christopher filed for divorce 2 weeks after the post went viral. Vivienne told me about it later, when we finally started talking regularly again. He'd come home from work, found her packing her things, and told her he wanted out. "My family thinks this is too much drama," he'd said, like her public reckoning with her own cruelty was an inconvenience to the Palmer family image. "This post, the attention, everyone talking about your mother and the burns and the wedding. My mother is mortified. This isn't what we signed up for." And Vivienne, my daughter who'd spent so many years trying to please these people, who'd sacrificed her own mother for their acceptance, looked at her husband and said, "Good. I don't want your family. I don't want any of this." She moved out that day. Went to stay with a friend from college, someone who'd actually been supportive when the post went viral. Christopher kept the apartment, the furniture, all the expensive things his family had bought for them. Vivienne took her clothes, her photos, and her dignity, and she walked away from the life she'd built on shame and lies. The divorce was quick. Christopher didn't contest it. Probably wanted to distance himself from the drama as fast as possible. Within 3 months, Vivienne was single again, living in a small studio apartment, working at a non-profit because she'd quit her job at Christopher's father's law firm. And she started rebuilding. Not her relationship with me, not yet. I told her I needed time, and she respected that. But she started rebuilding herself. She reached out to Dorothy and asked to attend our burn survivor support group. Dorothy called me first, asking if I was okay with it, and I said yes. So Vivienne showed up to our next meeting, this group of people with scars and stories and pain, and she listened. She didn't try to speak. Didn't try to make it about her. She just listened. She volunteered at the local burn center, helping with administrative work, talking to families going through what we'd gone through. She used her connections, her education, her privilege to advocate for burn survivors, to push for better medical care, better insurance coverage, better support systems. She started a foundation, used some of the money from her divorce settlement to fund research into burn treatments, to provide financial assistance to families dealing with burn recovery, to create support networks for survivors. And slowly, carefully, she started trying to rebuild her relationship with me. 6 months after she showed up at my apartment, we met for coffee. A neutral location, a small cafe halfway between our respective apartments. I got there first, ordered a tea, sat at a corner table with my hands wrapped around the warm cup, trying to calm my nerves. When Vivienne walked in, she looked different. Healthier than when she'd shown up at my door, but changed. Her clothes were simpler, less expensive. Her makeup was minimal. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked more like herself than I'd seen in years. Less polished, less perfect, but more real. She sat down across from me, ordered a coffee, and for a long moment we just looked at each other. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said finally. The same words she'd said in my apartment 6 months ago. "You're right," I agreed. "You don't." She nodded, accepting this. "But I'm asking anyway." I took a sip of my tea, buying time to collect my thoughts. "You destroyed me, Vivienne. On what should have been one of the happiest days of your life. You looked at me with disgust and told me I was ruining everything. You spat at my feet. You pushed me. You called me a monster. Do you understand what that did to me?" "Yes," she whispered. "I think I'm starting to. I worked 3 jobs to send you to that expensive school. I slept 4 hours a night so you could have dance classes and nice clothes and opportunities. I lived with chronic pain that never stops because I chose to save your life instead of saving myself. And you thanked me by being ashamed." Tears were rolling down her face, but she didn't look away. She held my gaze, accepting every word like the punishment she deserved. "But," I continued, and I saw hope flicker in her eyes, "I'm choosing to forgive you anyway. Not because you've earned it. Not because what you did is okay or excusable or something I can just forget. But because I'm choosing to. Because that's what mothers do. We love our children even when they break our hearts. We forgive even when forgiveness is hard. We give second chances even when they're not deserved." She broke down then, crying so hard she could barely breathe. "Thank you," she managed between sobs. Thank you. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life. Stop, I interrupted gently. I'm forgiving you, but I need you to understand something. Our relationship will never be what it was. You can't unsay the things you said. You can't undo the damage. We can build something new, but it won't be the same. It can't be. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. And I'll take whatever you're willing to give. Whatever relationship you're willing to have. Even if it's small. Even if it's careful. Even if you can never fully trust me again. And that's what we did. We built something new. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments when something would trigger a memory of that wedding day and I'd pull away. Need space, need time to breathe through the pain. There were therapy sessions, both individual and together, working through the trauma and the hurt and the complicated layers of our broken relationship. But slowly, carefully, we rebuilt. Not the mother-daughter relationship we'd had before, because that was built on my endless giving and her endless taking. This new relationship was different. It was honest. It required effort from both of us. It acknowledged the pain while working toward something better. Vivienne kept volunteering at the burn center, kept working with her foundation, used her platform, her voice, her resources to advocate for survivors. She gave interviews about her experience, about her shame, about learning to see beauty beyond the surface. She was vulnerable and honest about her mistakes, and people responded to that honesty. And me. I started to heal. Not from the burns, those would never fully heal. But from the heartbreak. From the rejection. From years of believing I wasn't good enough for my own daughter. I started attending speaking events with Vivienne, sharing my story at burn survivor conferences, talking about sacrifice and love and the price we paid to save the people we care about. I met other survivors, other mothers who'd sacrificed their bodies for their children. And I realized I wasn't alone. That my scars weren't shameful. That they were proof of the deepest kind of love. Have you ever had to forgive someone who broke your heart? Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship from ashes and pain? Drop your answer in the comments and make sure you hit that subscribe button because this story, this journey from cruelty to redemption, is almost over. And the ending, the final truth about scars and love and beauty, is something you need to hear. A year after that first coffee, Vivienne and I were having dinner at my apartment. She'd brought groceries, insisted on cooking, wanted to use the culinary skills I'd taught her when she was young. We were making pasta, something simple but good, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes and comfort. Do you remember, she said, stirring the sauce, when I was little and you used to let me stand on a chair next to you while you cooked? Of course. You were so determined to help. You'd insist on stirring even when the pot was too hot, the spoon too big. You never got impatient, even when I made a mess. Even when I spilled things or burned the garlic or added too much salt. You just smiled and said cooking was about learning from mistakes. It is, I said quietly. Cooking. Life. All of it. She turned to look at me, and there were tears in her eyes. I made so many mistakes, Mom. So many terrible, cruel mistakes. And you kept loving me anyway. Kept showing up. Kept hoping I'd eventually learn. That's what mothers do. I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it wasn't wasted. That love, that sacrifice, that patience. I'm going to make sure it meant something. And she has. Vivienne's foundation has raised over $2 million for burn research and survivor support. She's helped change hospital policies, improved insurance coverage for burn treatments, created scholarship programs for survivors pursuing higher education. She took her privilege, her connections, her resources, and she used them for good. But more than that, she learned to see beauty differently. To value substance over surface. To understand that the most profound love often comes wrapped in imperfect packages. Our relationship now isn't what it was. Something different. Something that required both of us to change, to grow, to be honest about our pain and our needs. We see each other regularly, talk on the phone every few days, share meals and stories and slowly rebuild trust. It's bittersweet, because there are moments I can never get back. Photos that will never exist. A wedding where I should have been front and center but wasn't. Years of my daughter's life where I was kept hidden, pushed to the margins, treated like something shameful. But there's also this. My daughter finally sees me. Really sees me. Not the scars, not the disfigurement, but the person underneath. The mother who loved her enough to run through fire. The woman who sacrificed everything and asked for nothing in return. And sometimes when we're sitting together having coffee or cooking dinner or just talking about our days, she'll reach across and touch my scarred hand. Hold it gently. Look at me with tears in her eyes and say, "Thank you, Mom, for saving me, for never giving up on me, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it." And in those moments I think maybe Dorothy was right. Maybe this was always going to be Vivienne's journey. Maybe she needed to lose everything to understand what actually mattered. Maybe she needed to hit rock bottom before she could start climbing back up. It doesn't make the pain less real. It doesn't undo the damage or erase the years of hurt. But it makes it mean something. It transforms cruelty into a lesson, shame into growth, brokenness into something that might eventually become whole again. I don't regret my scars anymore. I used to, for a long time. I'd look in the mirror and see everything I'd lost, everything I'd sacrificed, everything that made my daughter ashamed of me. But now I see something different. I see proof that love is stronger than fire. I see evidence that a mother's instinct to protect her child can overcome any obstacle, any pain, any consequence. These scars taught my daughter what real beauty looks like. They taught her that surface appearances matter far less than the heart underneath. They taught her that sacrifice and love and showing up even when it's hard, those are the things that define us. Not our faces, not our bodies, not how we look in photos or what people think when they see us. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson was worth the pain. Worth the years of rejection. Worth the heartbreak of being called a monster by the child I'd die for. Because Vivienne gets it now. She understands. And she's taking that understanding and using it to change the world, one burned survivor at a time. She's making sure other people with scars know they're not alone. That they're not ugly. That they're beautiful in ways that matter far more than what strangers see. My daughter broke my heart. But in breaking hers, she found it again. She found compassion, empathy, understanding. She found the ability to see past the surface to the soul underneath. She found her purpose. And in finding herself, she found her way back to me. Not all the way. The bridge she burned between us can never be fully rebuilt. But we're building a new one. Stone by stone, moment by moment, honest conversation by honest conversation. And this bridge, unlike the old one, is built on truth instead of illusion. On mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. On love that acknowledges the pain while working toward healing. It's not perfect. It's not what I dreamed of when she was a baby sleeping in my arms, when I imagined our future together. But it's real. It's honest. And it's enough. My name is Margaret Chen. These scars on my face, my arms, my body, they're not marks of shame. They're not disfigurement or ugliness or something to be hidden. They're proof of love. They're evidence of sacrifice. They're the price I paid to save my daughter's life. And if I had to do it all over again, knowing everything that would follow, every moment of pain and rejection and heartbreak, I would. I'd run into those flames again. I'd wrap my body around hers again. I'd sacrifice my face, my future, my entire life again. Because that's what mothers do. We burn so our children don't have to. And maybe, in the end, that's the most beautiful thing of all.